будуємо нову алею під Дніпром. Вже третю за цей рік. Ось ці всі могили викопані лише з початку вересня. Для загиблих із Покровська. Таке по телевізору не покажуть.
US President Donald Trump has said Russia and Ukraine should freeze the current conflict front line in the Donbass, noting that Moscow controls nearly all of the region anyway, he said. Trump made the remark after speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone on Thursday and meeting with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky the next day at the White House. In quotations, "We think what they should do is just stop at the lines where they are. The rest is very tough to negotiate," Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One on Sunday evening. "They should stop right now at the battle lines, go home, stop killing people, and be done," he added. When asked about the Donbass, Trump said, and I quote, "Let it be cut the way it is. I think 78% of the land is already taken by Russia. You leave it the way it is right now. They can negotiate something later on." Now, had this just been another Trump isolated statement, one might want to dismiss it as one of Trump's many flip-flops in his position about the war. But then we saw back-to-back statements from high-ranking UK officials reported in The Independent that should send shivers down the spine of any pro-Ukrainian supporter. On the 18th of October, the British Army chief dropped a bombshell statement that made headlines. It read, "Allies are giving Ukraine false hope in this Russian war." Britain's most senior army officer, Field Marshal Lord Richards, said that Ukraine could not win the war with Russia and should negotiate peace terms. A more comprehensive report came out the following day, on the 19th, and it read as follows. Field Marshal Lord Richards said Kiev will not be able to drive Vladimir Putin's soldiers out of Ukraine without the help of NATO forces, who will not get involved on the ground, he added. And here are the words straight from the Lordship's mouth. The interviewer asked him, "Ukraine could not win, even with the right resources?" "No," he replied. When pressed further by The Independent, he was asked, "Even with the right resources?" "No, they have not got the manpower," the former commando said. And these reports, and the reports on the front, support the Lordship's learned opinions. Top War, a Russian military publication, reported on the 20th that the throat of the boiler formed by the Russian army in the Pokrovsk direction has decreased to 5 kilometers. Close quotations. Exactly so much remains before the union of the two groups of the Russian armed forces collide. That was how they put it. One of them advanced southeast of Grishno, the other to the west of the previously liberated village of Krasny or Shevoni Liman. The article said that the exit to the northeastern outskirts of Pokrovsk in the Grishno or the Grishino area made it possible to cut off the Ukrainian enemy garrison from supply along the road, which in recent months has remained the main one for the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction. Specifically, it said that the Ukrainian enemy uses a small road that goes through Grishino to the east, then turns to Pokrovsk. The only problem for the armed forces of Ukraine is that the advanced units of the Russian army are already 500 to 600 meters from the physical cut and this supply route. And this is despite the fact that the firework on the transport of the armed forces of Ukraine moving on the specified road is carried out 24/7 by the Russian army, including ambushes in the form of loitering drones. These are drones that the operator lands on the side of the road or a little further away, waiting for a military target. As soon as the target hits the camera lens of the drone, the UAV takes off from an ambush and attacks the enemy's transport or manpower. To drive equipment to Pokrovsk, not on roads, but on the black soil in conditions of autumn slush, is no longer an option for Ukraine. And there was even a quote from a Ukrainian journalist that read as follows. A report by Ukrainian journalist Yulia Kirienko. In quotations, Russians are in the city. They set up a flag on the boulevard. The fact that it's difficult in Pokrovsk is, to put it mildly. Infantry and UAV operators are forced to enter the city on foot, overcoming kilometers with equipment. The infantry standing at the positions has been there for several months without replacements, because it is a risk. The capture of Pokrovsk by the Russians is a threat to the Dnipropetrovsk region. Closed quotations. As of the 18th of October, it is now known that the Russian command has deployed large reserves to the battle near Pokrovsk. The offensive has resumed to the west and east of the city, as well as in the residential areas. At the same time, Russian forces have reached the outskirts of the nearby city of Konstantinovka. The Ukrainian armed forces moved reserves to this area back in August and are now trying at all costs to contain the Russian advance. Without capturing both cities, however, Russia will not be able to progress towards Kramatorsk-Sloviansk agglomeration. This past week, several Russian Marine brigades that had previously operated in the Kursk and Sumy regions have launched an offensive at the base of the so-called Dobropilia breakthrough, which was created by Russia's 51st Guards Combined Arms Army back in August. The salient, located between the cities of Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka, is about 15 kilometers or 9 miles deep and 5 to 7 kilometers or 3 to 4 miles wide. The Ukrainian armed forces have been trying to eliminate it since August, relying on roads at its base between Shakovy and Novy Shakovy, where Russian supply lines could potentially be disrupted. The Russian Marines have likely been tasked with capturing Shakovy to remove this threat. They've chosen to employ a mechanized assault involving several armored columns, a tactic neither side has used in months, given how vulnerable armored vehicles have become to drones. Even when attackers manage to deploy troops and capture positions deep behind enemy lines, resupplying them later is extremely difficult for the same reason. One of the assault columns broke into the village of Volodymyrivka, southwest of Shakovy, while another reached the eastern outskirts of Shakovy itself. However, the Russians suffered equipment losses. The outcome of the assault remains unclear. Ukrainian sources claim all troops in Volodymyrivka were destroyed and the attack on Shakovy failed completely, while the Russian sources insist that their forces managed to gain a foothold in at least part of Volodymyrivka. Elsewhere along the front near Pokrovsk, Russian forces continue to rely on small assault groups for attacks. For instance, soldiers from the same 51st Army have entered the southern part of Rodinsky, where Russian troops have been unsuccessfully trying to break through since August in an attempt to reach Pokrovsk's northern exit and encircle the city. In Pokrovsk itself, Russian assault units have been spotted near the city's western exit along the highway to the Dnipro. Russian assault groups have also reached a fortified Ukrainian base at the massive coal mine that covers the city's western approaches. Meanwhile, Russian troops advancing toward Konstantinovka from the south, from the direction of Toretsk, and east from Chasiv Yar, have pushed to the city's southeastern outskirts. However, efforts to encircle the city from the west along the road to Pokrovsk and from the east from the Seversky Donets-Donbass Canal north of Chasiv Yar stalled months ago. Now, it would be remiss of me to leave without commenting on some of the other fronts where the situation is perhaps equally dire for Ukraine. One such front is the Dnipropetrovsk region. The Russian command has completed a regrouping of its forces at the junction of Ukraine's Dnipro, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia regions. Units from the 41st Guards Combined Arms Army and the 90th Guards Tank Division, previously withdrawn from the Pokrovsk area, have returned to the front near Novopavlivka, a village that serves as a key supply route for the entire Ukrainian grouping southwest of Pokrovsk. Russian troops were advancing on Novopavlivka from the northeast along the Solena River, from the west and from the south via a newly established bridgehead on the Vovcha River near the villages of Filia and Ivanivka. The aforementioned deployment has allowed the Vostok contingent to narrow its offensive front, which had previously included operations along the Vovcha River. It's now pushing strictly westward with two operational groups, one trying to advance as deep as possible into the Dnepropetrovsk region, heading in the general direction of Pokrovsk, and the other seeking to cut off the city of Huliapur, which is located to the south of Pokrovsk in the Zaporizhia region. Under pressure from Russian forces, Ukrainian troops defending the eastern approaches to Huliapur have abandoned a large area and withdrawn across the Yanchu River. The Ukrainian command will likely attempt to establish a new defensive line along this river. So what I see is that Russia is setting up the winter for the collapse of several key garrison cities, perhaps simultaneously. Pokrovsk and Kupiansk for sure, as they're all but gone, and perhaps Liman and Konstantinovka next. The severity of this blow to the defense of the Donbass cannot be overstated. Perhaps this grim reality has caused the change of tone from President Trump, the refusal to send the vaunted tomahawks, and the pressuring of Zelensky to accept a ceasefire. And now we add in the surprising interview with the British Lord Richards in The Independent. His words were frank, and it shatters the delusion that permeates the pro-Ukrainian crowd on social media. I will leave you with these last words from his interview, in quotations: "Unless we were to go in with them, which we won't do because Ukraine is not an existential issue for us. It clearly is for the Russians, by the way," he said. "We've decided because it's not an existential issue, we will not go to war. We are, you can argue, and I absolutely accept it, in some sort of hybrid war with Russia. But that's not the same as a shooting war in which our soldiers are dying in large numbers. Despite our attraction for all they've achieved and our genuine affections for so many Ukrainians, I'm just still in this school that says this is not in our vital national interests. My instinct is that the best Ukraine can do, and you already see President Zelensky, who's an inspirational leader, the best they can do is a sort of a score draw. And even that, my friends, are at best hopeful words for inspiration. The reality is, the beginning of the end of the Donbass is happening right now in Pokrovsk."